Hello, 8th graders, and welcome back. Today's video, we're going to focus on the 7.4 discussion. Okay, so this will be for Friday, April 17th. Hopefully, you've completed yesterday's homework already, which is that guided reading form. Again, that will take the place of your notes since I can't collect your notes. It's a short assignment where I just ask you some questions to make sure you're getting the basic points of what we're reading and talking about, and then you answer those questions and turn them in. And I give you the same points that you would have gotten if you would have turned your notes in. Okay, so you are getting points for that guided reading form, and it has to be turned in. If you don't have access to internet or are struggling to accomplish it, please let me know so we can get you help before you fall way behind. Okay, today's section is going to focus on abolitionism, and what that means is the root word is abolition, which means to get rid of or to abolish something is to get rid of it. Okay, so when we're talking about abolitionism, we're talking about getting rid of slavery. Okay, and this kind of builds off of yesterday's section of the last 2 days sections of the reforms. Okay, and we're getting rid of these things based on the Second Great Awakening, which is that religious movement that made people realize that I have to do good things if I want to go have a good afterlife. Okay, so because people now believe that because of the Second Great Awakening, people are finally starting to do some good things with reforms, such as now we're going to focus on slavery. Okay, so what we're learning here on page 408 is where I am if you want to follow along with me, is that there is early opposition to slavery. Okay, so of course the first place that is going to oppose slavery is going to be the northern part of the United States. And why is that? Because what does the South base their economy on? And remember, economy is how you make money. The South bases their economy on agriculture or farming. Okay, and in order to make a lot of money doing that, you need to have cheap or free labor. Well, the easiest way to have cheap or free labor on your farm is to have slavery. Okay, so of course the South really likes slavery because it benefits them. The North, on the other hand, bases their economy on factories and lots of mill work and things like that. So therefore, slaves are not as essential to them. Okay, so therefore, if you're going to be an abolitionist, which is someone who is against slavery, you are probably going to be from the northern part of the United States. Okay, the early efforts to get rid of slavery included trying to free those slaves that people could. In the North, such as places like Pennsylvania, religions such as the Quakers had always taught that owning another human being is wrong, and that's what people believe today, right? Owning another human being is wrong. Well, religions such as the Quakers had always believed that, and therefore did not practice slavery in the northern states. Okay, so of course the first states to be able to get rid of slavery are going to be like Pennsylvania and other parts of New England because it's not very prevalent there and people don't believe in it. What ends up happening to try and give these people, these slaves, homes is President Monroe actually comes up with the idea that they should start a country back in Africa called Liberia. Okay, and that they offer these freed slaves the ability to be able to go back to this country where they can then kind of run themselves, set up their own government. Some slaves really like this idea because they feel like if they stay in the United States, even though they are free, they will never have the rights that the white people do, and they're probably right at this time period. Okay, so some slaves really like the idea of being able to move to Liberia. On the other hand, lots of slaves at this time had already been born in the United States. Okay, so they were not ones that had been taken from Africa and brought to the United States, but rather those would have been their grandparents or their parents. So these new slaves have been born in the United States, and therefore they felt it was their right to be able to stay here, which they're not wrong, right? So they were born in the United States, and they had felt that their culture and all of their beliefs and their home was the United States, and they wanted to stay here. All in all, not many slaves moved back to Liberia. Some did, not as many as you would think. Most wanted to stay in the United States and be freed. Abolition starts to gain momentum in the 1820s, 40s, and 50s. Okay, is when it really starts to pick up. So people are starting to believe that slavery is very, very wrong. Okay, and of course these people are still from the North, right? People in the South are still fans of slavery because it helps their economy. It's how they make their money. It's how they're able to farm so efficiently on these plantation-style farms. Some of the people that are starting to of course, be against slavery are those Second Great Awakening white men. Okay, women also are starting to lead this movement. Of course, there are also African American abolitionists. Those who have become free, or they were not slaves to start with, are also fighting for those slaves who are still under control in the South. They want those people to be free. Okay, probably the most famous African American abolitionist, this is on page 409, is going to be Frederick Douglass. Okay, he was a very good speaker. What he could do is go up in front of crowds and convince them that slavery was wrong, and that it would emotionally move them, which is a really good way to speak. If you can make people emotionally believe in what you're talking about, you have a far better chance of convincing them that you're right. And he was able to do this. And of course, he was right. Okay, so Frederick Douglass is an important name to remember. He traveled all throughout the United States and the North, obviously, probably did not make many trips to the South, and also to Europe in order to try and convince people that slavery was wrong. Other Northerners that were white that opposed slavery include William Lloyd Garrison. Okay, he was a man with a substantial amount of money, but he believed in the Second Great Awakening and that slavery was wrong. So he organized many movements to try and end slavery, and he also started a abolitionist newspaper called The Liberator. And The Liberator focused on reasons that slavery was wrong and trying to free those people who were oppressed. Okay. The Grimke sisters were obviously female, and they were also opposed to slavery. Now, they faced additional challenges to the fact that the South did not like those people because of the fact that they were female during this time period. Many people at this time period believed that females did not have the ability to start movements and create leadership like the men did. Okay, and they made a great argument. They said, whatsoever is morally right for a man to do, it is morally right for a woman to do. So they're arguing that, what does it matter if I'm a male or a female if I'm doing the right thing? And they were absolutely doing the right thing in trying to ban slavery. So in addition to trying to end a movement that was very popular in the South, they were also facing the challenge of having to deal with the fact that women were not treated as equals during this time period. All of these people starting to create these movements led to what you would call civil disobedience. Okay, civil disobedience is exactly what it sounds like. It's breaking the law. Okay, but it's breaking the law in a non-violent fashion. Okay, so an example of civil disobedience during this time would be the Underground Railroad. Okay, the Underground Railroad was not actually a railroad. There was no train. Okay, but what it was is a network of homes and other places, churches, etc., caves, that these abolitionists would use to try and free runaway slaves from the South. They would either move them into the North or into Canada so that these Southern people could not get them back and make them work, okay? Now, the reason that it's civil disobedience is because it is against the law to help slaves escape in the South at this time. So they're breaking the law by helping these people not be slaves anymore. But it's civil disobedience because they're doing it for a good reason and they're doing it non-violently. Okay, so that's kind of the difference that we're seeing here with the term civil disobedience. And a really good example of that is the Underground Railroad. Obviously, when we talk about the Underground Railroad, we're going to talk about famous people like Harriet Tubman. Okay, she's probably one of the most famous abolitionists. She was a freed slave herself. Okay, and she helped many slaves escape to that path to the North in Canada. Okay, at one point there was even a $40,000. Remember, and this is in the mid 1800s, $40,000 as a reward for her capture because she was doing such good things for those slaves. The Southern people wanted her captured. Another way that people were starting to try and promote the end of slavery here is through books. One book that we've talked about as kind of an example in class before is going to be Uncle Tom's Cabin. Okay, now this book was written, and it actually is very stereotypical, and it uses a lot of exaggeration in the way that slaves were treated, in the way that things happened. But the idea is they made it this way so that people really started to believe that slavery was wrong. Okay, so they wanted to exaggerate, and they wanted to use these stereotypes so that people would realize by reading this that, wow, slaves are treated very poorly. Okay, and it's wrong to have slaves, so they shouldn't be there. So by writing this book, it was able to convince maybe those people who were highly educated that could, or had more money, that slavery is wrong. Okay, so that's kind of an important example during this time period as well through reading. There's other books like this too that have happened throughout history. For example, another one that comes to the top of my head is in Chicago. They had that, it's called The Jungle, okay, and that focuses on the meat processing industry. If you want, go ahead and give that a Google. There'll be lots and lots of information about it, but it's a very similar thing. It's kind of an exaggeration, and it uses a lot of stereotypes, but it was created in order to bring attention to a very negative issue in hopes of fixing it. All right. Abolition does face opposition, obviously. Okay, people in the South do not want their slaves freed, so these abolitionists from the North are going to face opposition from the South. Okay, these people in the South are starting to maybe become violent or starting to do bad things to try and stop these abolitionists from taking their slaves away. Okay, one example is remember William Lloyd Garrison. He was that white wealthy man who was opposed to slavery and started all the newspapers. He was actually dragged through the street by a rope. And this had different effects on people. Some people are like, yeah, that's what abolitionists deserve if you're from the South. Where on the other hand, people saw this happening. They're like, wow, people are really treating people like this because they want to free slaves. Well, now I also believe that slaves should be freed because this is just wrong the way people are being treated. So it did have a positive effect sometimes by these people being mistreated because they were trying to help people. It convinced other people that they needed to help too. Okay, and this you're going to see this a lot if through the reading here. Okay, also, Southerners were not the only ones opposed to slavery. Some Northerners, such as business owners of factories and things like that, were opposed to abolitionists, so they wanted to keep slavery as well. And the reason why would be because that those factories and mills and etc. relied on things from the South, like cotton or other products that the South was providing at a cheaper rate. If the South had to pay those people to work on farms, their products would get more expensive. So therefore, these factory owners and these people with lots of money from the North might be opposed to ending slavery as well. Okay, so don't think that the only people who didn't want slavery to end were Southerners. There were some people in the North who did not want slavery to end either. Other people in the North who did not want slavery to end included those who thought that if slaves are freed, they're going to take our jobs. So they did not want slaves to be freed either. So there were people in the North that thought that slavery should continue for those reasons, the fact that they relied on their products and they didn't want to lose their jobs. Okay. Southerners start to begin to defend slavery against the Northerners, okay? They're making arguments that you guys rely on our products, you're doing all this stuff. They also say that these abolitionists are asking for violence. So for example, some of the Southerners say that William Lloyd Garrison asked people to be violent. He told the slaves to revolt. They blame Nat Turner's slave revolt, which is when he and a bunch of other people acted violently towards slave owners. He blamed that on Southerners blamed that on William Lloyd Garrison because of his newspaper. Okay, so they're saying that these abolitionists are inciting violence. They're saying that they rely on their products. Why are you doing this to us? All those reasons to try and stop Northerners from taking their slaves away. Okay. The last point I want to get across here is that even Southerners who did not own slaves wanted to keep slavery. Why might that be? Because the Southern economy, which remember is how they make money, is based on agriculture, which needs slaves to be effective at this time, okay? So if you are in the South, but even if you don't own slaves, if all the slaves go away, your economy is going to crash, okay? So those people are like, well, I don't want that, right? I need money also. I need my job. We can't have a bad economy. So they're like, we need to keep slaves in the South as well. Even if you didn't own slaves, people in the South wanted to keep slaves because they were scared of their economy crashing. Okay, this chapter or section is actually relatively short, so that's about all that I have for you. It focuses on getting rid of slavery and early efforts to do so. It's another form of reform that we're going to talk about. On Monday, your assignment will be the guided reading for 7.4. Okay, it'll be another few questions that you answer just to make sure you're getting the big points. And then 7.5, we're going to focus on the reform of women's rights. So we're going to try and start focusing on how maybe women start to fight to have more equal rights that they deserve. Okay, if you have questions at all, make sure you're contacting me by email at stensvin@markzan.k12.wi.us. Okay, I will be sure to answer you rather quickly if I can. If you have questions about any of the assignments, also ask questions. Remember, this work is now graded, okay? So I need you to turn it in so you get that same grade you'd get if you were doing notes. Because remember, third and fourth quarter are going to be pass-fail. This is not review work anymore. Okay, this is like real school, except we're doing it on the computer. So if you have questions at all, I'm the guy to ask. Okay, if you don't have access to internet, talk to either me or Mr. Coatman, and we'll try and get you set up as soon as possible so you don't fall far behind. All right, have a good day and make sure you stay healthy. See you later.